Welcome to Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Tuesday morning. Well, Tuesday morning West Coast time, 11 a.m. We're 2 o'clock on the East Coast and an hour in for Central and Mountain time. And I am very, very excited to welcome back to the Way to Wow shows my friend Mark Brouker, retired Navy captain, and leadership expert. And before I start talking to Mark, I just want to remind you that tomorrow is my show, People Making Money. And my guest is Laura Israel. She's a lawyer who's dealt in the family law arena for many, many years. And she's going to be talking on the subject of marriage and money. And if you have been married, then you know that's just an area rife for conflict. But it can also, of course, through monetary dealings, bring a couple closer together. So I invite you to join us tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, to listen to a woman who has spent her entire career dealing with these issues. And while I say she's been in family law, she's really been on the side of working to keep marriages together and mediate disputes in order to create harmonious relationships. So she has not been, on the opposite of facilitating the breakups of marriages. So want to mention that to you, so you can put that into your calendars right away. Now, turning to my guest, Mark. So Mark was in the Navy for, 30 years, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And his sort of crowning achievement, in addition to rising to the rank of captain, was to be the commanding officer of a naval hospital. I'm sure Mark will talk a little bit about that as we address the subject. But since retiring from the Navy, Mark has really spent his time diving ever more deeply into the subject of leadership and taking the study and the practical lessons he learned as a leader in the United States Navy and bringing them to people in the civilian world, to our fellow citizens, and giving them the benefit of all that he learned during those decades in the American military. And Mark wrote a few years ago now, wrote a book on leadership lessons from the Navy. And I'm sure Mark will mention that. We'll put a link to that book in the show notes. But first of all, Mark, welcome to Business Lessons from the Military. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you again and be back on your show. Really thrilled to be here, man.
Yeah. So whereas last time you were on the show, we really kind of talked about your professional arc, if you will. Today, I really want to focus on lessons of leadership that you learned, in the Navy that people can apply to their civilian businesses, to working in nonprofits, even in working in academia. I think that so much of what is of value in the military comes from the quality of leaders that get developed as someone's career progresses, whether it's an enlisted career going up into the non-commissioned officer and senior non-commissioned officer ranks, or as a commissioned officer going from junior to senior officer, et cetera. Almost so much of what makes the military work is leadership. So I'm going to kind of throw it open to you to give us kind of your thoughts on how you see bridging that leadership gap going from military to civilian, and let the conversation develop from there.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Kevin, for inviting me on. I tell you what's really interesting. Since we've last spoke, I've probably I do a lot of coaching now. So I have the advantage of now listening and coaching individual leaders at all levels, actually literally at all levels. I do a lot of CEOs and I do a lot of folks who are brand new and everything in between. What's interesting is it's all the same. The principles are the same, whether you're a brand new leader or you're running a General Motors, frankly. And what I've come to find out is what the good news is, the things that it kind of just intuitively understood as I came up through the ranks of the Navy and went into the book. In my opinion, it's correct. I mean, what I'm seeing with all these folks, the leadership they're displaying, and really, in a nutshell, Kevin, it comes down to behaviors. That's it in a nutshell. If you behave in certain ways, you will create a culture of trust. You'll know what's going on because you'll be told what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And at the end of the day, you'll more likely make the right decisions. Leaders are paid to make decisions. That's it in a nutshell. And those who make the right decisions, more or less, their companies grow. Those who don't make good decisions, their companies don't grow. And that is directly attributed to how people treat their people. It's playing out as we speak with what happened in Ukraine. It's Ukraine and Moscow and Russia. It's not a company, but what I talk about in my seminars is a case study of a culture of fear is playing out as we speak. As we all know, Russia goes into Ukraine, and we all thought that Ukraine was going to fold. It didn't. We find out that the Russian army is not nearly as strong as it was. Putin was probably told it was strong, but people were probably told him lies, frankly. They didn't tell him the truth. And here now he's got a major problem on his hands. And that's obviously a macro example of a culture of fear. So the bottom line is, if I were in business, I would not overcomplicate this thing. The bottom line is it's not about command and control, it's about care and compassion. And usually when I get invited to a speaker symposium or whatnot, people are thinking, here's this guy from the Navy, 30 years, and I've got a flat top, and I look pretty militaristic, and and I come out and say, hey man, it's not about command and control, it's about taking care of your people. And that's it in a nutshell. When I came into this leadership at the high levels, like you talked about, this running my hospital, I tell the story. I don't think it was a panic attack, but I couldn't sleep about 3 nights before I was actually going to take over this hospital. And the reason I couldn't sleep is I realized I had outkicked my coverage, if you will. I did not, as I thought about it, I said, I don't really know how to run a hospital. And that was not an overly dramatic statement. I'm a pharmacist by trade. I ran a lot of pharmacies. I did have some exposure to the C-suite, but in my opinion, not as much as I probably should have. Other people saw some leadership in me and gave me this opportunity. But when I had that night of panic, I guess, but again, 3 nights before this change of command up in Bremerton, Washington, I'll tell you where it was, in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. My wife looked at me. She said, why can't you sleep? I said, well, I'm not sure I know how to run a hospital. Which she looked at me with a look of horror. She said, you're telling me we're 3 days away from this thing, you don't know what you're doing? And that wasn't an overly dramatic statement. I knew I was, again, outkicked my coverage. Other people knew it. Now my wife knew it. But what she said to me, Kevin, she said, Mark, you've been studying leadership your whole life. And I have been passionate about this subject, as you have been. I just find it fascinating. I'm still learning. We just had a discussion before we went on air about leadership. But she said, just be the best leader you can be. You're not going to learn how to run a hospital in 3 days. And that's what I did, Kevin. I made a major effort to do one thing. I wanted to convey to my people that I cared for their well-being. I got to know them. They saw me a lot. I was respectful. I course corrected them when they were doing things wrong. And I certainly gave them ample opportunities to tell them they were doing a good job. And I was usually pretty upbeat. I tell people, you do those five things, you will create a culture of trust. You'll be told what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, and you more or less your likelihood of success will increase significantly. And this is backed up by many, many studies that I've found. I'm still coming across these studies. So what I try to tell leaders is don't overcomplicate this thing. At the end of the day, you want your people to conclude that you care for their well-being and they will work hard for you.
So, and that certainly has been, my experience, both in and out of the Navy. So you mentioned there's five things that a leader should focus on. Would you take a minute and tell us what those five things are? Because I think if I'm reading your message correctly, these are the five things we want to have sort of plugged in back here, right? So that each day as we're going through our activities, we can say, okay, I need to be doing this, or I need to be doing three, or I need to be doing one, or
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the opportunity, because this really is the essence of, this is what I coach on, and this is what's in the book, of course. And again, what's beautiful is it's what I'm going to talk about. I feel more confident today than I did even yesterday, because every time I have a call with one of these folks in these levels of leadership, what we're going to talk about here in the next 5 minutes is absolutely amplified and proven, frankly, to be the case. So the first thing I like to talk about is getting to know your people. You think of people that you trust. Well, you trust these people because you know them. You and I formed a very quick relationship, and I began trusting you. So when you have someone come on board after they go through the grueling process of getting hired, and they finally show up at your doorstep, and you have your first one-on-one with them, they're going to expect you to go through the do's and don'ts and all this other stuff. And I counsel, don't do that. When they get through that grueling process, say, welcome aboard. You've been through this process, it's been taking a while. Really glad to have you on board. We're not going to talk about work today. I want to get to know you. I want to tell you a little bit on my story, and that's what we're going to do. And you basically have your 5-minute elevator speech of your story, because they do want to know about you. You've obviously in a position of leadership, and then turn it over to them, saying, tell me your story. Ask them the hobbies they have. What do you love to do? What do you expect me as a leader? What are your expectations of me as a leader? And all you have to do is listen. I mean, there's no major skill set here. Listen and be intrigued with what comes out of their mouth. Ask them if you can take notes, take some notes. That is a extremely powerful way to build a foundation of trust. It doesn't seal the deal, if you will, but to build a foundation of trust, there's no better way. And the skill set needed, again, takes time, and it takes the ability to listen. The second thing I love to talk about is being visible. There's people on the call here may know about this thing called high reliability organization. It's a term used that the aviation community has embraced with crew resource management. The nuclear power industry has embraced this for safety, and healthcare is trying to embrace this, and specifically the VA. And one of the foundational practices of a high reliability organization is the leader is seen. The leader is not behind closed doors reading, sending emails out all day long. They call it leader rounding. I call it being visible. It's the same thing. And again, when you're leader rounding, what you're doing is you're listening. You ask people, what can I do to help you? And you follow up. It's very important to follow up. There's studies that show following up is the key. And one of the stories I love to tell real quick is this happened at a major hospital during COVID. A CEO went to the ward, I think it was an ICU ward, intensive care unit, and asked the nurses in the middle of COVID, these nurses work so hard. They said, what do you need? They said, well, we can't even get hot food. Our microwave busted. So the CEO went to Walmart, bought a $50 or $100 or whatever microwave, brought it back to the nurses. And do you think that built some trust and some love from the nurses? So it's little things like that make a huge difference. If you don't get out of your office, you don't know what they need. The third thing I love to talk about is show people respect. And listening is really the ultimate form of respect. When you listen, you don't have to agree with people. You just got to acknowledge their point. But it is incredibly important to show respect. And respect is easy when things are going well, much harder when things aren't going well. And that's your crucible moment as a leader. What do you do when you get bad news? If you go and hide to the right and get angry, that creates a culture of fear, and cultures of fear breed really bad decisions. Again, going back to the story of old Putin, he made a bad decision going into Ukraine in retrospect, but that was created from a culture of fear. I don't know what happened with this submersible that, off the coast of Cape Cod. I'm going to guess, again, I don't want to trample on anyone's soul. We have 5 dead folks, but somewhere in that debacle, I'm going to guess there was some level of culture of fear. People were maybe afraid to tell the truth, that this is maybe not as safe as it turned out to be. We'll probably never know that. So the three that we'll talk about so far is know your staff, be visible, and be respectful. This fourth one is probably the most important. It wasn't the first in the book, first one I brought about in the book, just because I didn't have the wisdom I know now. And the fourth one is this one. You can do all those three things. Think about it. We probably work for people who are out there. They're very charismatic. They go out and they get to know you. You see them. They're respectful. They listen very well. But if you don't do this one, you're going to come off as being a nice leader, but ineffective. And this one is course correcting people. What I like to say is don't ignore good or poor performance. You set expectations, and when people make those expectations, you tell them, good job. And I just was at a seminar at a pretty big hospital. I'll just share this with you because you can't make this stuff up. In this seminar, I did the same thing. I'm going through a little bit faster with you guys, obviously, but with this, I had 90 minutes. And one of the things I said is we write people up for awards at any institution, any organization. We write people up for days off. We give people promotions and all that. I said, that's all good. Don't take that away, but don't underestimate the power of just saying, good job. You did a wonderful job. So after I gave this talk, the CEO of the organization got up there and he was telling a story about how he was off-site the past weekend, and one of his people came up to him and said, boss, I just want to tell you, thank you for being here. It really means a lot to us. Thank you. And as he's telling this story, Kevin, he starts breaking down crying. It meant so much to him. Literally, he got emotional. And I basically said, it was uncomfortable in the fact that this guy, he broke down in front of 50 people. And I'll just share with you, this guy's a prior military. This person is not a snowflake. He's a tough guy. But the point is that thank you meant so much to him. It belies the fact that I'm saying that, don't be afraid to tell people a good job. And the last thing I talk about is optimism. People like working for people who can see the glass half full as opposed to seeing the glass half empty. And that's a two-edged sword, because you can't come off as being naive and not talk about the elephant in the room. But those are the 5 things I love to talk about. Again, be visible, know your staff, be respectful, don't ignore good or poor performance, be pretty upbeat. Don't be walking around all day with your ring in your hands. And I'll share the last one I just talked about very quickly is these are skills that every leader needs to understand and embrace. And the last thing I talk about is you need to continuously relearn these leadership tenets. Study leadership to be a better leader.
So one of the things that struck me is, and of course I've read your book and am familiar with these 5 principles, is at least some of them we can practice just in our day-to-day lives. So for example, getting to know people, we don't have to do that only as a leader on the job. One of the things I try to do with respect to my daughter, she'll be 16 soon, and I'm helping her sort of figure out how do you successfully navigate the world, is show her how to create relationships with other people. And so we'll meet someone who's a stranger, and we'll have some reason to interact with them. And from the get-go, I work to, learn something about that person, and show her how much that enhances the whole situation, just by, in essence, treating people like people. Whether one of my pet peeves is people tend to treat folks working in retail stores as, I don't know, machines, and they don't treat them very well. And I've had so many conversations over the last several months where I'll meet someone and just be, so how do you like it here? That kind of thing. So we can practice these principles that you've mentioned outside of the leadership arena. I'll share one other quick story. So I'm friends with a woman who manages my favorite restaurant. And over the last few weeks, I've really seen it growing as she's done some, marketing things. And when my daughter and I were there on Thursday, I walked up to her just before I left. And I said, really, you need to be congratulated. It's so vibrant in here. It's so busy. That's really terrific. And kind of like you said, I thought for a moment she was going to cry, just to be told, hey, good job. And she's not responsible to me or anything, right? I just did that because we're friends, and I thought she, should be recognized as succeeding. So we can practice these, I think, no matter what the arena is.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Kevin, it's so funny. So I was at this event not in California, it was in Arizona. And the morning I went to McDonald's to get a cup of coffee and I love sausage McMuffin in the morning when I'm on the road. So it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. This was the cleanest McDonald's I've ever seen. The people were super friendly. 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, people are half asleep here. But I'm sitting with my buddy and I said, we were talking about the McDonald's. And I said, this is the nicest. I travel a lot and I do go to McDonald's for my meals if I'm on the road. And I said, who's the manager before we left? And again, we're going to the event to talk about this leadership stuff. And well, he's not here, but the supervisor's here. I said, bring him out here. So the guy comes out and I said, I got to tell you, I travel a lot. And this is the nicest, most friendliest McDonald's I've been in the last 5 years. And again, I'm not saying the guy almost teared up, but I could tell in the whole team kind of came out. And this is all that took place in about 10 seconds. I didn't have a long speech for these people, but I just told them the truth. And it meant so much to them. And as my buddy and I were walking out, he goes, they're probably going to be talking about that all day long. And again, they don't mean from a hole in the wall. I'm just some stranger, but it's a powerful, powerful way to connect with people. And especially in a leadership position. Oh my goodness, when you tell a young person who's just came aboard, you did a really good job on that project last week. Holy smokes, man, that makes their day. And it gives them confidence to maybe push themselves a little bit. So it's an easy thing to do. You don't have to write anything up. You don't have to ask the boss for extra money.
Right. Yeah.
It's low-hanging fruit. It's a softball.
Yeah. So here's a question. This may be a little bit out of left field. So I've shared this before on other shows, but I'm not sure if I've told you this. I'm actually an introvert. People think because I do these shows or whatever, oh, he must be an extrovert. And there's a little bit of confusion, I think, over introvert versus extrovert. But for me, as an introvert, to do many of the leadership aspects that you've described, it takes a lot of energy interacting with people, being visible, being out there. What advice do you have for introverts who are in leadership positions to sustain the energy level and the focus necessary to be a good leader without sort of exhausting themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's funny. I gave a talk with a buddy of mine who's actually a retired general. We had to give a talk on pros and cons of introverted and extroverted leaders. And what we concluded was introverted leaders are actually more effective. Again, that's a broad statement. We didn't have any data, but the point is introverted leaders are as effective as extroverted leaders. And what's beautiful about, and I think I'm an extrovert. I haven't taken any tests or anything. I haven't done the DISC thing in a while, but the point is, what's beautiful about introverts is I think they're better listeners. And listening, if all the gifts that leaders have, and Colin Powell is the one I could come to think of immediately. He was just a tremendous listener. Listening is a gift. And I think introverts are better listeners. And one of the things I say in the book is no one's going to tell the boss to stop talking. Some bosses just go on, and they're the first to speak in a meeting. You should be the last to speak in a meeting. And I think introverts have that instinct that they listen better. I just, that's just anecdote. I don't have any evidence to prove that. But the other side is introverts, it's going to take a little bit more energy, like you said, or maybe more a push to get them out the door to walk around. But again, and it's easy to do. Once you start doing, matter of fact, I'm coaching a guy who was not on board with his leader rounding business, getting out and walking around. And he's an introvert. Absolutely. He told me he's an introvert. So once he started doing it, he saw the power in it. when people come up to him, this thank you thing happened during one of the leader roundings, the same person I'm talking about. And he understands now the power of walking around, and he loves it. He absolutely loves it because he sees that there's a payback here. So I think for introverts, I worked for many introverts. They were tremendous listeners. It's again anecdotal stuff here, but don't shy away from being a leader if you think you're an introvert. You make great leaders, but just like anyone else, what I wasn't good at as a leader is I don't like reading data. I don't like reading spreadsheets, but sometimes you have to do that. Right. Sometimes you have to do things you're just not inclined to do. And those that push themselves to do it can go very far. So it's a great question, Kevin. It's a question I get often. And I love answering it because some of the greatest leaders in the world have been literally introverts. They're fantastic listeners. That's their gift.
So one of the things you said in answering that question was, no one's going to tell the boss to shut up. It reminded me, and please correct me if I'm misremembering, but there's a theory of leadership, and I think it comes out of the Japanese corporate world, where when there's an issue that needs to be discussed, the most junior person at the table will be asked to give his opinion first, and then it kind of works its way up the seniority ladder. And otherwise, they would be fearful that whatever the top guy said, everybody else is just going to mimic. Rather than giving their candid thoughts. I'm wondering what you may know about that and what you think about that
well, it's a best practice, Kevin. I mean, and again, I haven't heard it that disciplined as the most junior, but I'll tell you what's interesting is I'm coaching a gentleman who's in the Green Berets. I do this through this honor foundation. I've been, pro bono work and help these folks who get out of the military, go into the civilian world. So I do a lot of coaching, but I get to talk with these incredibly high performing individuals. And one of the things this person said, just like you annotated, they go through, make sure everyone in the room has a chance to talk about a mission before they go on this mission. And that is a high reliability organization leadership best practice. I've never heard it that you find the most junior first, but that is brilliant, frankly. You find the most brilliant first. If the next book I write, I'm going to steal that from you. But the more importantly, the leader must be the last person to speak. Because if you say, I think the paint, the wall should be purple, they're all going to say, yeah, I think that's a great idea, boss. Purple's a great color. And that takes some discipline, not to be the last to speak. But I don't know where you read that, but that's a brilliant best practice.
I'll have to see if I can dig it up for you, and if I can, I will pass it along. So, what advice do you have for junior people who maybe they're working for a leader who is not a great leader? Who he's the kind of leader who he's always going to speak first, or he's not accessible. How does maybe someone who's recently out of college or something like that, what advice do you have for them to deal with this kind of leader?
Kevin, I got to tell you, man, that is, when I used to go overseas a lot before COVID, I'll get back on the road again, but all cultures, all organizations, all levels of leadership, that's the most popular question I get. And it's kind of sad when you think of it. Okay, I understand what you're saying, Mark, about leadership, but I'm working for someone who does the opposite. So I've done a lot of thinking on this. I don't have the perfect answer, but the first thing I tell people is give that person grace. You don't know you don't walk in their shoes. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So try to give them some grace. At the end of the day, though, you have a choice. You can either say if you think you can change their behavior, if you think you can enlighten them, then I say talk to someone you trust. A spouse is probably a good start. Maybe someone not in the company, because the company, people start spreading rumors, but find out, do you think you can have a conversation with your boss to help him or her become a better leader? I'm going to say 90% of the time, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be effective. So be very careful before you get on that road, because you don't want to cause more harm than good. So if you conclude that I can't change this person, you have a choice. And the choice is, again, give them grace. That may buy some time, but at the end of the day, if this is causing such a discernment with you, or not discernment, discontent with you, and maybe impacting your health. And I talked to, not a fair amount of people who are in this boat, Kevin, and I tell them, you need to move on. I think this is impacting your health, and I think you need to move on. And they call me up a month or two later and say, I just quit. I got a new job. I'm making less money, but I'm happier than heck. So at the end of the day, the good news is we all have choices. And if you're in a position where you're working for someone who's just very, very difficult, you have a choice to move on. Here's the good news, though, but I'll end with this here real quick. We're at the end here, but you're learning a lot about leadership. You're probably getting it. I tell people you're getting an MBA in leadership when you work for someone who is not respectful, because you will not do those things tendency-wise, because you see how harmful they are. So while it's painful to go through those, you can learn a lot from a leader who's not stellar, frankly. But again, it's a painful process. And at the end of the day, you got to take care of yourself.
So we are at our time. Do you have a few more minutes to spend?
Absolutely, Kevin. Thank you.
So I want to ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
And this was something that I faced in my Navy career very early on. My first duty station, one of my key people that I worked with, I had what I thought for him was a fantastic opportunity to go to the Marine Corps, one of their NCO leadership academy. And he was a Navy petty officer, second class. He would have been one of the first Navy guys to go to a Marine Corps leadership program, which was a really big deal. And I was, of course, I had been able to get him this opportunity. I was so filled with what I did, right?
Yeah.
And this sailor at first thought it was great. And then talking to his wife and thinking about it, he became very concerned that he just wasn't up to the physical standards and such of the Marines and other things. And to his credit, he came to me and said, "Sir, I really don't want to do this." And I could not hear it. I'm like, no, I get it. You're just nervous. You're going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And this went on for about 2 weeks leading up to the program. And I think he must have gone and talked to somebody else, because that person came to me and essentially said to me, Chaplain Bemmel, who are you doing this for? Him or you? Right. So I called the senior chaplain that I work for, and I said, sir, here's what's going on. What do you recommend I do? And he said, I recommend you have a talk with your conscience and make the best decision for your sailor. Yeah. And so I ended up going to him and saying, you know what, I'm very, very sorry. I just couldn't hear you for some reason, but if you really don't want to go, then I'll make this go away, basically.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, as that junior sailor, should you challenge the decision of your leader? And if so, how do you do it in a way that will be effective and not necessarily damage the relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's change management and talking to your boss. Well, first of all, it just happened to me. This happened about a month ago. I had to have my boss support me doing something. And this was on a Wednesday. And my buddy said, well, just call him up today. I said, no, I'm going to wait till Friday. So it sounds so simple, but people are in better moods on Friday. So wait till Friday if you have an issue with your boss. And then if you go in, again, I'm assuming this is not urgent. If there's, the Taliban coming over the berm, obviously it's urgent, but most things, let's be honest, that aren't urgent. It's something you want done. And so with my boss, it's funny you mentioned, I haven't thought of this story, is my boss he was an idea guy. And I'll just tell you, it's Admiral Faison. He's a great guy. He's my best boss I ever worked for. And I'd go in there with a piece of paper and he would come up with ideas, and I'd write down all these ideas, and they were all good ideas, but there's no way we can implement all these things. So I would find the time to, when, he's always in a good mood, but sometimes better moods than not. And I said, sir, hey, all those ideas you had, did we whittle it down to like 2 or 3? And yeah, no, they're all, we got to, I said, sir, let's just kind of work on 2 or 3. And I always deliver on those 2 or 3. So I guess that's, but more important, have that emotional intelligence at the peak level. Wait for your boss to be in a better mood than not. And just, you just got to sell it. To try to explain the reasons why you can't do this or can do that. If they're giving too much to you, which is one of the things I do a lot of coaching with professors at major universities, and these folks are hungry. They can't say no. And next thing you know, they're paralyzed with too much to do. So I tell them, you got to learn to say no. And when you go to your boss, say, I can do this, but what can I take off my plate? So, managing your boss is an art in itself, but simple things I say is find them in a really good mood, relative, usually a Friday, and just try to, again, now we're getting in a lot here, but try to manipulate it so it's their idea. And I can't think of an example that I used recently with one of my old bosses, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to deliver what you promise. And I think what I did with Admiral Faison, the 2 or 3 things that I said where I delivered on, we delivered on. Mm-hmm. So when you build credibility with your boss, you have more leverage to say, we won't be able to do this. So I guess it goes back to the old adage that you deliver on that which you promise. And be very scrupulous of what you promise, and you'll have a better chance of managing your boss.
Makes sense. Well, gosh, I think we actually should have planned for 2 hours. The time went by so quickly. But hopefully you'll come on again, and we'll dive more deeply into this. We were talking before the show about the book that you're writing on Nimitz, and looking forward to to talking with that, even though I guess some of the writings being delayed and such. But
hey, could I just add one last thing? This has come the last 60 days, and it's not in the book, the current book that I that finished a couple of years ago. But I tell you, this has been so powerful. I want to share it with the audience. Yeah. Is whether you have a person who's not performing well, and you're going to have a difficult conversation with him or her, or someone just a one-on-one, they are performing well. But going to the first one, if you have someone who's not performing well, a beautiful way to start the conversation is, you're doing a great job doing this. This is an area where we need some improvement. What can I do to help support you better? And then just stop. And I've been coaching people to do that, and they're very hesitant to it because it takes a lot of courage to say, what can I do? Basically look in the mirror. And if you read Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, this is exactly what he talks about. You own it. So one of the things I've been coaching on a lot is when you're having a difficult conversation with someone who's not performing well, you got to start the conversation. What can I do to help support you better in this project? It just changed the dynamics, Kevin. It's so powerful. And frankly, I wish I did it when I was in my 30 years in the Navy. I did not do that. Yeah. But it's gotten tremendous results with people who have done it in the last couple of weeks. I just had to share that.
Well, thanks. And it is interesting because I've been working with a very close friend of mine who's one of the most successful real estate agents here in Los Angeles. And I've been able to sit in on some of his coaching sessions, and that's how he always starts out his coaching sessions. He'll say, so, okay, we'll chat and we'll have our coffee, whatever, to sort of, warm things up. And then he'll say, okay, so let's start out. What problems are you having, and what can I do to help you solve those problems? Because that's the only reason for me to be here, is to help you solve the problems that you have. Yeah. And it's enormously powerful. And I candidly am not a big fan of the term servant leader. It just sounds wrong to me. But having said that, I think a lot of what a leader does is offer to support his or her people so that they feel like there's someone who cares about their progress.
When you have, Kevin, it's so amazing. These organizations I've been in and helped out, what I've come to conclude is this: you got to have some level of competency in the job you have. But I'm convinced, I'm telling you, Kevin, I'm convinced that you could put someone who doesn't know how to boil water, put them in charge of a restaurant and treat their people well, and obviously have someone who knows a little bit about running a restaurant. But if you don't have to know how to run a damn restaurant, you need to know how to treat your people well. And when you do that, they will rise to the occasion. And that's what happened at Bremerton. Even though I was clearly not the most proficient person in hospital operations, after that 3 years, we won more awards than any other hospital in the region. And it was, big region, the whole Pacific Rim. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because, again, I am not an expert on hospital operations. To this day, I'm not. But I understood through all the study and whatnot about leadership. So it's basically how you treat your people, that in a nutshell.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thanks so much. Thanks especially for spending extra time here. These last few minutes with those extra ideas. I appreciate it very much. And like I said, hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Well, thank you much. Thanks so much, Kevin, and continued success to you, my friend.
Okay, I'm going to have you hang tight just for a minute while I wrap things up here. So that's it for today. We'll be back. We're here again tomorrow, as I mentioned, with my guest Lori Israel, talking about marriage and money on my show People Making Money. That's 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. And if you want to join us live, just go to our Eventbrite page and get a free ticket. Otherwise, you can watch us on all the streaming that you're watching us on now. And then we're going to do it all again next week. Well, next week is 4th of July week. So we have some kind of special shows lined up because of 4th of July. And so please, give us a view next week. And last thing I want to ask you is, if you like the show, do consider going to our YouTube page and subscribing and letting other people know about it. We're here to help. This is sort of an exercise in leadership, if you will. So if there's a topic that you are curious about or need information about, do drop us a comment into any of our social media. Send me an email, and I'm happy to develop a show on that topic. And if it's on leadership, I'll bring Mark back and we'll fire those questions at him. So thank you all very much for watching. I appreciate it very much. Look forward to seeing you again soon. And just signing off, as I always do, about my great friend Marie, darling, you are and ever will be my belle.